time for Lykken on Lending.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have you with us.
Welcome to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update providing up-to-the-minute information on interest rates, loan programs, and hot industry news, all related to the mortgage industry. Brought to you by Transformational Mortgage Solutions. To participate in today's program, our guest call-in line is 646-716-4972. Now here's your host of Lykken on Lending, David Lykken.
Let's begin.
Listeners, I'm excited to have joining me back on the podcast, Dr. Cindy McGovern. She's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Every job is a sales job. We talked about that in the past. Let's get going with this interview because she has a new book coming out. We're going to hear about it, but we're also going to get something on a topic that is really important for all y'all, as they say. We're in Texas. All y'all. I love that. I'm from Minnesota originally. I could almost say that with a Norwegian accent. All y'all. You're going to get learning a lot. So our listeners can get a chuckle out of that. But anyway, it's great to have you here, listeners. But Dr. Cindy McGovern, so good to have you here. Really appreciate you and your heart to help and work with people. You're awesome.
Well, you are so kind. It is so great to be back here today. And thank you so much for letting me get on here and give this message to folks, try to help even more people.
Well, it's good to have you back, and it's so exciting. We're talking about personal brands, which is what your book is about, and we're going to talk more about your book at the end. But I want to get into the topic of personal brands. I think everyone talks. They think of a brand. They think, well, a company has a brand. Some departments have brands. I mean, that's not as common, but brands certainly are associated with larger corporations or all companies of all size. But people need to be aware of a personal brand, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. So, what is a personal brand? And Dr. Cindy, and why is it such an important one, especially that one that someone be aware of that they need to create for themselves?
Well, so the first thing is a personal brand is really how people think about you. It's often confused with your reputation, but it's more than that. Your reputation is a facet of your brand. Your brand is really what people say about you when you're not in the room, how they're going to tell a story about you, and it's who you want to be known as. So if you even think about a product brand, you can think of the packaging, you can think of what it is, and what it does for you. Same thing with a person. And what I would encourage folks to recognize is they actually have a brand, whether they realize it or not. So part of messaging is helping them to know that you have this brand, and is it on purpose? And is it really giving the message that you want others to take away? And so I want to help people to hone that message so that they're having the impact that they want to in the world.
Well, I think people think of a brand, they think of a message, they think of other things, but a part of your brand is, do you show up to meetings on time? Do you show up prepared? There's so many elements that go into a brand that we just take for granted as part of my products, who I am. Yes, that all is encompassing of the brand. Can you explain the connection between the personal branding and sales? Because sometimes people muddle those two up, and I think there is a distinction I think you can help us with.
Yeah. So it's funny because the brand is what you're selling. And I would argue to say that that's the most important sale you're ever going to make is how you sell yourself. Right. But there is huge confusion on that because I think that people think, well, if I show up on time, of course, people know who I am and what I do and what I'm bringing to the table. That's one facet of so many other things. And what people need to recognize is even if you have this great brand and you're doing all the things you're supposed to do and you're checking all the boxes, are you living it? Are you selling it? Are you getting
really good
advocate for you? And if you're not, that brand is just there. It's like having a thing on the shelf, but never advertising it.
Yeah. So good. That's so good. Everyone thinks of a product. Well, you are the product, listener. You're the product. They're getting a mortgage loan through your mortgage company, but who's the person that's actually making this happen? It's you, the person. I think it's so important. The product brand, company brands, but you are the brand, folks. You are the ones. And that is just such a great point. What are the three critical components of a successful personal brand? You talk about this in the book and now tease us a little bit or give us some more information. They got to buy the book. Tell us, what are the three most important critical components?
So there's an often skipped step, which I'll talk about. But the first thing is you have to create a brand. And it's really being mindful of what that actually is. What is your brand? What do you want it to be? And what your legacy is. And I think people forget that they're already building a legacy, that the one you mean to be building. And especially folks that want to get into a leadership role. Your leadership legacy starts way before you ever get that on your business card.
So important to know.
So you've got to craft that brand just like you craft a business plan. You're the business of you. You're the CEO of you. So craft to be. And then the next thing is then you start living it. Then you bring it to life. You really start that's where you show up on time. That's where you make sure you respond to those emails, where you're going above and beyond. You're making sure that customer has everything that they need. We call it customer service. It's more than that. It's about a customer experience. It's about interacting with other human beings so that they have a positive story to tell about you when you're not there, whether they were an actual customer of yours or not. And I think we forget every interaction is a transaction of some sort, right?
Well, this starts getting into sales strategy, and which is another thing that your first book gets into. You really help people with this, but you really take it to another level. So what are the most effective sales strategies to help people sell themselves in any situation? And these are one of those markets where there's a lot of different situations that can vary almost day to day based on the direction of interest rates, supply of homes. So what is the most successful strategies that you recommend?
Well, it's funny because that's actually the third critical component is you've got to sell that brand. And so part of the successful sales strategy is having a sales plan. Just like you have a sales plan for your business, you have a target list, you have your
sales plan and sales strategy. I mean, are those one and the same in your mind, or are those?
No, they're a little bit different. Yeah. So the strategy is kind of where you want to go and what that sort of bigger picture is. The plan is the action items to get there, the actionable steps. Right. But I think that people don't take enough time in their personal brand to think of what that is, because you can go off brand in a second and it affects everything else. One misstep can affect all the things that you've done. So when that selling moment comes in and recognizing that every interaction really is a transaction, and you're selling 24/7, especially when you're the brand. And for a mortgage loan officer, we know this. You're selling everywhere you go. You're selling at the supermarket, right? Like everybody you come in contact with is a potential referral source, at least, if not a potential customer. But what is your strategy in terms of getting the message out about who you want to be known as? Because it's hard to differentiate. It's, there's the brand of the company, but it's really the brand of you. And what are you doing to make people trust you faster, so that they want to use you when they have that opportunity, or they want to refer you when they have that opportunity? And that sales plan is how you build that network. That's how you start getting in front of the right people so that they can tell the story about who you are, so that you got to build those minions to, your network should be working for you, right?
Yeah. It's so point. I mean, really what you're talking about is a sales reputation, or you might say a sales legacy. And so when someone talks about David Lykken or Dr. Cindy, they go, oh, I really love talking to Dr. Cindy because, and they state your legacy. So talk a little bit about how does your personal brand shape your legacy? What's the relationship there? Is your legacy.
At the end of the day, it is truly the steps and the footprints you're leaving behind with people.
So it's experience. So it's not, when you say footstep, it's the experience that they have with you is what you're talking about there.
It is. And I think we forget that if you have a 5-second interaction with somebody, you made an impression on them.
Yeah, one way or another, you made an impression. So how do you go in and start correcting when something didn't go quite like you want? That different ones, we either step in it ourselves, or a circumstance that we didn't anticipate caused by our company or by people that work with us, or circumstances outside our control can make us not look like that. They want someone to blame. They want to point their finger. How do you work on that?
I actually think that's the best chance for you to sell your brand, because it's the way that you react to that, and it's how you interact with them when there is a problem. Anybody can sell something great when the market's good. We all know this, right? Like, it's when those little hiccups happen, or when those challenges come into play. When market economies are good and products are flying off the shelves, they're not as worried about packaging. They're not as worried about positioning. Well, market loan officers, we're worried about that all the time, right? Because we're trying to differentiate in a fairly commoditized world. So part of the challenge is when you have that moment to come through for somebody, even if the answer is no, even if you can't fix it, but it's the way you handle it, you leave them with that impression of who you are and how you did it. And it's the ethics too, right? It's the ethical aspect of like, hey, this is not the right thing for you. Maybe you walk away because it's not a right thing. Leaves that.
Yeah, the ability to walk away is, I think, one of the most powerful negotiating tools in the world. When you are so desperate for every transaction and you don't realize, this may not be the best transaction for you, the relationship we have going, it may not be best, and have that ability to walk away. It brings a lot of power. Talk about someone who needs to rebrand themselves during a job change or a career change.
So that is one of the things that's happening right now in the world.
Wow.
Like we already know that the great resignation, the great regret, the great reset, and I would argue next is the great rebrand, right? So what's happening, and I think what I would encourage people to do is whether you've changed jobs or not, the world around you has changed.
Yes.
So customer base has changed. And I think, any mortgage loan officer that's dealt with anybody in the last 2 years, the hair was on fire and other body parts were catching, right? So there was lots of things going on.
Yeah.
As we're rebranding, when there's a little bit more normalcy in the market, when there's a little bit more breathing room, it's what you do. It's what you're actually doing to bring that experience forward so they have a great experience with you.
Yeah, that is really important part of that thing. And sadly, because of the amount of layoffs that are happening, there's a lot of people having to change jobs or even change careers. And it's just such a poignant point you bring out there. How do you know when it's time to rebrand yourself? There's different markets, different seasons in the business cycles. And each one of those, you need to rebrand yourself. There's a great book out. I have it right here on my shelf, Who Moved My Cheese? And every time you talk about something having to move a market shift, sometimes is it rebranding or repositioning? Clarify all that.
So I think it's both, right? The repositioning is sort of looking at the market that you're going after. The rebrand, selling to that market would be my sort of really layman's definitions of the two.
Right.
But Who Moved My Cheese is one of my favorite books because it talks about that reactionary aspect of what we do when things change around us. What I would encourage your listeners to think about is how they're anticipating those needs to change.
That's good.
At the end of the day, we're a cyclical business. We know this. So how are you anticipating those changes? How are you making sure you're positioning yourself to be the go-to person when the pie gets smaller, to be the go-to person when the home prices change, the inventories change, to be the person.
That's reposition yourself for when the market does shift. And that's really then there. And so that's a part of the rebranding from, hey, I'm thinking more futuristic and I'm a person that you want to be in relationship long-term. Is that what you're getting to?
Absolutely. And it's a referral business. At the end of the day, you are truly selling yourself. And yes, it does have to do with what products you can sell based on where you work and that kind of thing. But we all know this, and especially mortgage loan officers, your clients follow you. They want you. They trust you. And that's what you've sold them. You've sold them that you're going to give them the best possible experience. You're going to give them the best possible tools and resources and products. But they actually bought your trust and you bought their trust.
That's a really good point. I think trust is the currency which all sales should be built and is the foundation upon which it all happens. What are some of the potential problems of selling against an old brand? Let's say you were really good at a particular aspect of the business, whether it been refinances and now we're in a purchase business is one of the most obvious that we're saying. How would you address these kind of problems in advising someone? So
that's one of my favorite questions because that's what everybody's having to deal with right now, right? Mm-hmm. Is refi, now purchase. And if you became known as the refi gal or guy, that's part of the challenge is they don't know you have a multifaceted brand. They don't know that you have that skill set. So part of what you have to sell in this moment is that transferable skill set. You can do it. You can do it. You've been doing purchase loans before the refi was booming anyways, but they don't know you as that. And so that's where the proactive versus reactive part comes in. Because my guess is when there was the whole refinance, they were coming to you. You were kind of the flower, not the bee. And now you're having to go be that person to get that message out there. So I would encourage folks that are listening and thinking about that brand, if you were known as that, you've got to control the narrative. You've got to change that narrative out in the market. And if they say, oh, well, she or he was great with refi, that's only one thing I do. Do you know that we actually do this and this, and we can do commercial, do all these other pieces? Make sure you're being proactive about the story people are telling about you.
That's really so important. But I think there's times also that when a brand that you thought was going to work isn't working for you. And that can present a little bit of a crisis. And so how long do you work with a brand approach to branding yourself? And when you say it's time to make a change? Any advice? Does that vary from the situation? And some it's market driven. So how quickly do you change brands?
Well, part of what I would say is you can't change on a dime because that in and of itself will fly in the face of your brand. And if you're, oh, I'm this, but nope, tomorrow I'm this and tomorrow I'm that. We all have that friend that like changes careers every 5 seconds. It seems, I want to be this, grow up, I want to be that. you want to be really careful about that. But when it comes time to rebrand in that role, what you look at is it still serving you, meaning you to reach your goals? Are you still impacting the same amount of lives? And if you're not, then you seek some feedback. What you're hearing, and look for those blind spots for yourself in terms of, why isn't this brand working? And is it me that changed, or is it the world that changed around me? And that's really part of why I wrote this book and why I want to help people with this is the world has changed. You got to sell differently to them now. The expectations of the world have changed. So look for that. Look for that feedback. And if you're not getting what you want out of life, out of the job, out of the work, there's probably a little rebranding that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking of, as more and more millennials come into the industry, how they want to interact is going to be quite different than some people that have the old brand. Hey, I'll come and meet you. They go, I don't want to meet you. I don't meet people. Yeah. Can we do it online? Can you text me this? And if you don't have those rebranded yourself in the communication styles of the new customer that's coming to you, that's really important. What is the best course of action if you go off brand? And maybe we should start by saying, what do you mean in your book when you say you go off brand, and what is the best course of action when that happens? So explain it, and then what do you do?
So it can happen to anybody, truth be told.
Explain off branding first. Let's go there. In fact, let me editors, I'm going to re-ask that question because I first send you, this is a pause of the recording for whoever's doing the editing.
That's okay.
First of all, I think it'd be good to explain. You talk about something in your book called off branding. So I'll go there and then say, that happens, what's best course of action? So let's explain and define off brand first. Okay, sound good? Okay, restart the recording. Press the record button. However you say that to the editors. Here we go. So explain, let me say that again. Re-ask the question. You talk about, I'm trying to get it out of here one more time. Third time's a charm. In your book, you talk about going off brand. Explain that.
So going off brand is basically going against what people's notion of you is. And sometimes when you're rebranding, the reaction can be that, oh, well, wait, that's not her. That's not him. He's this guy. He's that guy. She's this girl. She's that girl. So part of it is it could be happening during the transition. But usually when you go off brand, it's something that's very out of character for you. It's not in with how people know you. And by the way, this can happen to anybody. We can all have a bad day. We can all snap at somebody. We can all fire that email before we took a second to breathe, right? And so,
ouch, that one's close to my heart. I've done that. Ready, aim, shoot. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of the challenge with that, David, is
shoot, ready, aim. Yeah, whatever.
Making sure we take a breath. And if you've gone off brand, so you've gone against
out of character. Yep.
Out of character, own it. The first thing to do to fix it is own that it happened. Because the more you explain it away, it creates distrust with your community and distrust with the people around you. And you said it a second ago, no sale happens without trust. So if you're trying to sell yourself and then sell loans or whatever it is that you're selling, part of the challenge is you got to build back the trust. And you broke the trust by going off brand. And it's recognizing that and saying, I had a bad day. I'm human too. Oh my gosh, that's not what I meant. Let me fix it. And then you have to build that trust back up. Yeah. And so we have to work a little harder to get that back. And we probably all got that, right? We've got somebody in our lives where we reacted too quickly. And you saw how that created a little chain reaction in them. And we need to fix that, because what ends up happening is you just change the narrative that they say about you. You don't want that narrative getting out. So the sooner you can fix the off-brand piece, the better. And it's like celebrities. When celebrities do something, they have publicists that go out there and fix things.
Slap someone on stage. There's probably one of the most celebrated big ones out there. How do you quickly recover out of that? So that was so off brand, but so that's the kind of thing you're talking about. So own it. Number one, we did not see that happen in that particular case. And we're seeing a lot of it there's a whole science and a whole industry that are around when people go off brand. On a personal basis, your book's a great resource for that. So let's get to your book. In your book, you talk about someone's personal life, or you might say their side interest or their side hustle or their side ambitions. That could be, selling tickets to the latest raffle for your kid's high school. It could be, some, strong religious convictions that you have. You're wanting to get more people to go to your church or whatever, something like that. That all can affect your personal brand. And I want to get some suggestions. You have some boundaries that people should consider when they have these. We're not all business. We are people. And I think it's important for authenticity where you share your life. But where does that go awry and confuse your brand? And how can it complement?
Such a great question and a complex one. So let me deconstruct a little, because the biggest piece of that is recognizing what your brand is known as to begin with. So get a little inventory of how people think you are and who they think you are. And is it in line with who you want to be known as? And I completely agree with you, David. We have to be authentic. If you're not authentic in your brand, you're not going to be able to sustain it. It's going to be exhausting if you're faking it, right? So we are human, and you are absolutely, and I call it multifaceted. Like it's like a diamond. We're multifaceted human beings. You're a parent, you're a sibling, you're a friend, you're doing the raffle, you're on this charity. It's when it, again, flies in the face of the brand as people know it, or it detracts from the brand you're trying to sell them. So if there's competing brands, right? You can absolutely be a parent selling the raffle ticket and be an amazing mortgage loan officer, and they can marry together. But it's when they don't fit. And that's where the private life or the side hustle can damage your brand. If it's so far away from the core of who people and how hard you've worked to sell that brand.
Good. So it's not that you're saying don't have those side hustles, those side interests or ambitions and interests, but it's using wisdom on to what degree and how far that might be off from how people know you. Is that what you're saying here?
That's exactly it. And I would even take it one more step, David, and say, keep your private life private sometimes. We live in this world of it's a peer review society. If somebody sees that you posted something on your highlight reel, which, let's be honest, everybody's social media is their highlight reel, that doesn't seem to fit, that also is part of the message. And I think that's the thing that I want people to recognize is you're selling 24/7, whether you realize it or not, because you're either online, so your online presence, it's people who are talking about you. You've got to make sure that story is the same across the board.
Boy, that's bringing up so much because we're talking about authenticity, being yourself. But I mean, I'm thinking of one particular bank president had us come in and work with them at one particular time. And he said, we looked at their brand. And I said, have you been to taking a look at your employees and some of your employees that are out there and how you have a particular value system? And this particular bank had a real strong conservative value system. And yet the employees who state they work for this bank, so they show up in connection with the bank, are out doing keggers and very inappropriate things out there, and it's posted all over the social media. That's an example of that. We're not telling you not to go out and do that, but use some wisdom and how you're posting it. And that's a challenge, especially for the younger ones that are going, hey, I'm going to live my life. I don't want to have to do that. So I think that is the one to navigate with some advice from you. And quite frankly, from your book. I think your book is such a great, excellent. I want to have one more question, then I want to get into talking about your book. Say, what are the benefits of aligning your brand to the employees? We're just talking about the bank.
Yeah.
How important is it? And if they're so far apart, if you love to party and post the pictures about partying, maybe you should work for a conservative bank that has different stated values. Is that what the importance would you say?
I think that's really important. And so many companies are now looking and hiring based on values. Like this kind of started many, many years ago with sort of Ben and Jerry's was one of the first values where it was very public about it, right? So I think that's something that that companies are doing. They're looking for people that align with those values. It also makes it easier for everybody if your values do align, because it's easier to be authentic. You're being yourself. And quite frankly, every single person in that organization is an ambassador, whether they're a salesperson or not, whether they're a mortgage loan officer.
So important.
And if they're living those values, it does nothing but reinforce the brand. Employers know that. So they want people that can be authentically themselves. But going back to your comment about, somebody that's going to the kegger or whatever, doesn't mean you can't do that, but there's a filter you can put on, privacy.
Yeah. It's not that you can't post it. Just don't post it without the property, just so your friends see it. Put it out for the whole bank to see it in this particular case.
The whole world.
Yeah.
And to the point of companies and hiring people that have those same values, it's also recognizing it's a culture that you're building, and it's happier employees. It's better culture. It's happier. I truly believe employees first, because if your employees are really happy, they're going to take care of your customer. So companies recognize that as well. And I think it's super important to recognize that is a trend that started maybe 25 years ago and has become more important than ever, especially in more of a remote or hybrid work environment, maintaining that company culture. So looking and aligning those values is even more crucial today than it even was maybe 5 years ago.
Well, you're great. So this whole topic of brand and your personal brand and the corporate brand and any dissonance or too far a separation is really, I'm thinking of another, everyone thinks that this is only applicable to the new younger generation coming in because they're coming out of college and they were used to posting all the party pictures and a dress that may not be appropriate. When I'm talking about the attire, what they're wearing, how little or much they're wearing, might seem like, well, I just did it. I'm just being what I am. Well, as you grow into the business world, but you'd think it's just that group. But we had an individual recently who posted something, and he's well up there in the years and had just too much alcohol, and posted a couple of pictures that unfortunately, or pictures were taken and got posted that assassinated his brand. I think there's such an awareness about this, Dr. Cindy, that is so important that people just be aware of this every moment. If a picture was taken of you doing this right now and it got posted, how does this fit? Is it congruent with your brand, or is it just a complete, like, what on earth type of thing? So it's such important, which I think that's why a good reason why people should read your book. There's a lot of obvious great tips. Some of the obvious ones are we talk about some like, oh my gosh, type moments. But I think it's so important that people be aware of and cognizant of it. So let's talk about your book. When is it going to be published? And it's coming out?
It is coming out September 27th.
September 27th, right around the corner. How perfect timing with our releasing of this podcast interview of you. And where can they buy it? And then what means by which they can read it or listen to it? I love the part that you do Audible. That's a hit. Talk about that.
Yes. So it is available literally at your local bookseller, online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, indie booksellers, and our website as well. And the biggest thing is I am actually recording the audiobook starting this weekend. So I will be in the studio. So it's me reading it, which is really fun. And it's also going to be available in electronic format.
Well, what reason I love authors reading their own material, because you get insights when there's something that gets transferred, when you hear the tenor of someone's voice, the way they communicate, it comes through the literally how their voice sounds. So I'm really excited that you're reading it and not letting some professional reader do it. So way to go. That's awesome. I'll be reading it and listening to it. I may start listening to it because I'm an Audible guy. I could consume it a lot more, and then I go back and read it, which I did with your first book. So you're just amazing, Dr. Cindy. If people want you to come to speak, or they want to get to know you, they want to retain you, what are some other ways that they can reach you?
You can reach me at drcindy.com, and my email is really easy. It's drcindy@drcindy.com. I answer my own emails, and I'd be happy to talk with folks because I think it's so important through this great rebranding that we're going through. And my goal is to help people to be able to reach their personal and professional goals, recognizing how powerful your personal brand is in doing that.
It's so exciting to get to spend another hour with you, or some part of an hour. And I just hope this blesses our listeners as much as I know you have helped so many people. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us today, Dr. Cindy.
It is absolutely a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Folks, get both her books, and you will not be disappointed. Share amongst your staff. This is something that people need to be aware of, especially when you're getting concerned about some people on their brand being a little not representative of your brand as a company leader, as a company. This would be a great book to hand out. Should be in the library and hand it out to everyone as they start on their new job with your company. It should be just here's a welcome packet. And in this book is Your Personal Brand. It's a great book. Encourage you to get it. Thank you again, Dr. Cindy, for being here. Appreciate your friendship and the relationship. You're just outstanding. I love what your message is and what your mission is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
You've been listening to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update with your host, David Lykken of Transformational Mortgage Solutions. Join us next week, and thanks for listening.